Hey guys, this is Annie.
And this is Gail.
Welcome to Heroes,
And Zeros.
a true crime podcast. Oopsie.
Well, Annie.
Hi.
Here we are.
Wish I could hear you.
In my storage closet off my office.
Yeah, we're sitting on the floor, so that's super fun.
Our microphones are stacked on different boxes.
Yeah, we should post pictures.
Definitely. It's an interesting setup. But
it is.
It really shows the start of everything. Right?
It's pretty a hodgepodge of, I think we're doing this, right? So I like it.
We're pros, baby.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we released our first episode yesterday. So,
yes.
Yay.
And, I was so impressed with your voice, Annie. I can only hope I can keep up with you.
You mean in like what's that called? The speed?
No, you have a great voice.
Oh, well, thank you. I love hearing that, but I was speaking really fast. So I apologize. It will get better. I think I was just over caffeinated and super nervous. So
you know what? Well, it's all learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That was our first episode. Right. So
I think it'll be fun.
Give us a break.
To listen back.
Yeah.
5 years from now, what
yeah. Even like a month from now. Right. Hopefully I get better faster than that.
If you listen to our first one, and I know you did because you're listening to our second one, we want to thank you so much.
Absolutely.
For being a listener. And of course, we'd love to have you as a donor too.
And I think we do have a Patreon link. And I'll get that to you when I have it.
Cut that there. And
yeah, absolutely.
And then put that in and then.
Okay.
Yes. So as a reminder, though, be sure to continue sending us your stories that you want to hear from us or stories that you have.
I had this thought too, Gail, to call it Hometown Heroes or Hometown Zeros. Okay. If you have someone from your locale, that survived something amazing, a crime, let's just say it is a crime or whatever, or there's an act of heroism where they rushed into a house and saved a family of 6 or, whatever. Or if you have a zero that was like a serial killer was from your town or, that kind of thing. Or if you have some fun ghost stories.
Scary stories.
Scary, spoopy, stoopy stories.
I think earlier than October, like September through October.
Yeah. Well, I also had this thought that we don't have to wait till then. I always reference my husband like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. And he's pretty smart. So he said, why don't you read like a couple emails during each episode?
Well, folks, we just may. We first need to get some emails. So go ahead and email us at heroes20 and more
at gmail.com. All right. Sorry, just bumped my microphone. It's really loud in my ears.
When you're in a closet.
All right. Okay, on Christmas Eve day in 1968, it was a chilly day, but it was sunny, and it was only 10 degrees in Des Moines, Iowa.
Oh, we should probably let everybody know that today it's even colder, like 8 degrees.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
I heard it's supposed to be 17 below. No, 17 below on Thursday. That's tomorrow? Dang.
Aren't y'all jealous?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was a very cold day.
It was a very chilly 1968.
1968 Christmas.
And this is in Des Moines, Iowa.
Christmas Eve?
Christmas Eve day.
Okay.
Yep. A cute little blonde-haired, blue-eyed 10-year-old girl named Pamela K. Powers. She was from Urbandale, and she was on her way to a wrestling tournament to watch her 14-year-old brother, Mark. On the way, she convinced her parents to stop at a pet store so she could cuddle some animals, as any 10-year-old little girl would do.
Absolutely.
As I would do.
For those of you that don't know, Iowa is definitely a large wrestling state. So.
Yes, it is. We have a lot of talented wrestlers.
Absolutely.
So when they get to the downtown YMCA, which is where the tournament was held, Pamela asked her mother, Nelda, if she could get something to eat. But, being a good mama, she said, honey, first, why don't you go wash your hands? So Pamela skips off and heads to the bathroom. And so her mama is waiting. And she waits, and she waits, and she waits, but she doesn't return.
Oh, worst nightmare.
Yes. So now the parents are alarmed, and they start looking for her. They're asking friends if they've seen her. They're asking the YMCA staff. But then it becomes real when they have to call the police. Robert Leonard was a 14-year-old boy who was also wrestling at the tournament, and he says that he was sitting in the bleachers that day, sometime around 1 p.m. And Pamela's brother, Mark, came up to him in the stands and asked, "Has anyone seen Pammy?" She had gone to the bathroom and she never came back. Soon after her disappearance, then, the Y staff has learned about it. The Y's desk clerk, his name was John Knapp, he spotted a man leaving the building with a large bundle that was wrapped in a blanket. The man was registered as Robert Anthony, and he'd been staying at the Y since October. And Knapp assumed Anthony, who had fallen behind on his rent, was trying to make off without paying.
Okay, so he sees him carrying out a blanket. Looks like it
has something in it.
Yeah. It could be anything of his stuff, and trying to get out of there without paying rent.
Exactly. So he, in the back of his mind, he's like, okay, this little girl is missing. He's not carrying a little girl. Wait a minute. I know this guy. He is running out of the building. So he looks like he's in a hurry, like he is trying to stiff him for the rent. So him and a few other guys chase him, and he calls out to him and says, "Hey, Anthony, what's in the bundle?" And this man mumbles, "It's a mannequin." Then Anthony slipped through the door. He got to his green Buick and tossed the bundle in the car. He locked the doors of the green Buick immediately, and he sped off. But a boy who was standing by...
So, wow, he was able to run, throw...
Yep, he opened the back door of his green Buick, threw the bundle in the back seat, shut the door, locked it, and then...
before anybody could get to him.
Yep, but there was a little boy that was standing at the entrance that had opened the door for him, and so he kind of followed him because he saw the other guys running after him to the car, and he got to look in the back seats, the back window on the driver's side, and saw that bundle that he threw in there had little skinny white legs sticking out of it that weren't moving.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So...
Where are you going to get a bundle at the YMCA? Or not a bundle, a mannequin at the YMCA.
I know. You could
It's not part of the song.
No, I know. That keeps going through my head. I can't sing it. Please don't. So John Knapp, he calls the police, and he gave him a description of the car, including the license plate. And they identified the runaway boarder from an Associated Press wire photo. So John already knew who the man was, but they wanted to see if this car was also registered to him.
Okay.
So it came back that, the picture was of this man, and the license plate was Anthony Ethel Williams. But apparently that was just one of his aliases that he had invented during a half dozen years of criminal activity. So they were a little surprised because Williams had settled in Des Moines and was working 2 jobs as a billing clerk for an insurance company and as an assistant pastor at a Baptist church. And I believe this Baptist church was just downtown, not too many blocks, I think, from the Y.
So he was trying to put his life together, and
he was appearing to put his life together. Yeah. So the congregants knew him as extremely congenial, soft-spoken, polite, well-dressed, and articulate, exhibiting talents in singing and playing keyboards. In fact, he had just given a sermon that Sunday before, so less than a week earlier. And they said that there was absolutely no hint that this self-described, quote, vagabond minister, unquote, might be a dangerous criminal. So I think they called him vagabond because, he really didn't have a place that he was settled. He didn't own a home. Some people, except he was well dressed. The rumor was when my husband, who was also 10 years old, when this little girl was kidnapped, that's how I even learned about this. I had never even heard of Pamela Powers until my husband told me about this. And he said, "Oh, you guys need to cover this. This really made an impact on me."
Well, yeah, at age 10.
Yeah. He would wake up each morning and listen to a radio show. It was called KGRN. I think it stands for K something, and GRN is Grinnell.
Okay.
And which kind of plays into a later part of the story. In fact, so they thought, the rumor is that Anthony Williams was a homeless guy, because I guess the YMCA during those times would be kind of like a hostel or a hotel on one part of the annex, and then the other part is where they would hold conferences or tournaments, basketball.
Like the YMCA.
Yeah.
You can always stay
at the YMCA. So Robert Anthony Williams, he was 24 years old at this time. He was born March 19th, Excuse me, my tongue is getting in my way. Get out of my way, tongue. So he was born or he was born? Born March 19th. We're going to cut that part out. Robert Anthony Williams was 24. Born March 19th, 1944, known also as Reverend. His most recent arrest had been in 1965. Okay, this is a trigger warning if you don't like hearing about children. Raping 2 young girls in Kansas City, Missouri, one of which was a 7-year-old little girl.
Wow.
And instead of jail, the attacks landed him in a mental hospital where he remained for 3 years until July of 1968, where he just simply walked off the premises and became a fugitive. So I wonder why they thought he was not a criminal, but someone that deserved to be in a mental institution.
Yeah, especially, when was this?
1968.
Right.
Or 1960.
1965.
1965, yes.
For those of you that may be listening, Kansas City is just a short 3-hour drive from Des Moines.
Yeah, just south. So I don't know why, they deemed him unstable or whatever, that they put him in a mental institution where he could just decide one day he's going to leave, and he does. Walks out the front door, walks across the lawn, and goes to Des Moines, Iowa. Thank you. No, we don't. If only he wouldn't have come here, but that's a whole other story that I'm going to start over right now, because now I'm ranting. So in those days, the YMCA downtown Des Moines was a shiny, decade-old building, and it was complete with a dining service and a residential annex that at the time housed not just homeless drifters, but travelers, almost like an extended stay hotel.
Okay.
Yep, kind of like what we said earlier. And among them was this guy, Robert Williams. So apparently he paid the YMCA $16, I guess, and 83 cents a week to rent this room, which $16.83 a week. So no wonder people kind of thought he was homeless. He didn't make that much money, and he was working 2 jobs. But so it was just a single room. But there was a I don't know if she was a clerk or what, she worked at the YMCA. Margaret Avant, she says she didn't trust him. So today she's like in her 90s, and but she still works the front desk in the same building. But in those days, she was called a salad girl for the food service. So she's no longer working these days. Gail is smiling at me. Okay, start over. Hi, everybody. Just kidding. Cut.
I think we sometimes need to go with some of the funny things like that,
Yeah.
right, Don?
But
yeah.
So
when you said a salad girl, because I'm like, it sounds like a porn prepper or something crazy.
We are still recording. We didn't cut.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
Actually, Margaret Avant.
So
Marguerite Avant.
Marguerite.
Yes.
Marguerite worked at the YMCA as a young girl. They called the salad tosser. Now, in her 90s, she's still working at the YMCA.
If that building was still there, I think she would be. They tore that down like 6 years ago, I think.
Interesting that she stayed there all that.
I know. She was loyal. So she apparently had encountered Williams when she took up food one time to the cooler, and then she locked the door behind her. She said when she turned around, she saw Williams' face looking through the window at her. So she ran to the front desk, and he followed her and asked her why she was running. So she just had a bad vibe about this dude. Something about him, she says, was spooky. Just the way he acted was weird. You just had that feeling. So thank God the door's locked, Avant said. It's intuition, and Marguerite was right to listen to her intuitive inner voice. So now we're going to go back to the scene at the YMCA. The Des Moines police detective, Arthur Nelson, he arrived at the Y, and he said nobody could find her. He searched Williams' room. It was room number 754, and they found nothing.
And I'm sure they went through every closet, every storage room, everything.
Yeah, because they had multiple people looking for her, and it was a 10-year-old blonde little girl. So,
however, they also had to know that looking for her, in the back of their mind, they know this guy threw something, aka a mannequin, into the back of his car and took off.
Right. So I'm sure they're panicking. So, let's see.
They're putting 2 and 2 together.
So soon Detective Arthur Nelson, he says, we got out and we looked all over the bottoms and on the east side of Des Moines, where we figured we might have some friends, where he might have some friends. Blooper cut. Soon Des Moines Police Detective Arthur Nelson arrived at the YMCA. He said nobody could find her, and they searched William's room, which was room number 754, and they found nothing. He says, we got out and we looked all over the bottoms and on the east side where we figured he might have some friends. So Reverend Robert Kim of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church pulled aside Mark Powers, the brother, and told him his sister had been kidnapped. So he has to be stressing out. This little guy he's 14. He knows something bad has happened to her. But he says, you're not thinking 2 or 3 days down the road, who lives in Cedar Rapids today. He says, you're just worried. How do I get her back? Yeah, you panic when you see your folks falling to pieces and your dad, the rock of the world, is upset. Yeah. So I just can't imagine all the emotions that would be going through all of their minds. His father's name was Merlin, and he was a supervisor at the Ford Motor Company implement plant. And he told the Des Moines Register reporter later that day, so it's the same day that little Pamela disappeared.
Christmas
Eve Day. So the parents are back home in Urbandale. And when the reporter from the Des Moines Register interviewed him, he said then he didn't think that there was much hope, because under the unlit Christmas tree were the fourth graders' unopened presents, which included clothes, a doll, and a mirror bought for her by her brother Mark. The next day was Christmas, of course, and Nelson and fellow detective Cletus Leeming learned that Williams might have friends in Davenport, so they decided to drive there and question the residents. So also on this same day, Christmas Day, there was a janitor at an interstate rest stop near Grinnell, which is 40 miles east of Des Moines and where my husband is from, found a bundle of blood-stained clothing, including orange stretch pants and white bobby socks that Pamela had been wearing.
Wow.
And I just spoke to a friend of mine the other day who is a year older than me. Hi, Mary. And she remembers this case. I do not ever remember hearing about it, but she would drive past that exit every time she went to see her grandparents. And so they would talk about it.
Absolutely. And your husband, I'm sure, the fact that he lived in Grinnell and it was off of the interstate there.
Yeah.
Grinnell, that
Mary was 5 years old at the time.
Wow.
And my husband was 10. So there are certain things like that that can really make an impact. So, excuse me. Blooper cut, whatever. Let's see. Okay, continue. He and the rest of Iowa, my husband, and Mary apparently, and a lot of other people, all of the Iowans were shocked because they waited anxiously, wanting to learn more, hoping for a happy ending. They would read the newspaper, they would listen to the radio, they would watch the news, hoping for that happy ending that just didn't come. The day after Christmas now, for those of you that celebrate Christmas, that would be December 26th. The next morning, Anthony Williams, surrendered to the Davenport police on advice of Henry McKnight, a lawyer he had met in Des Moines. Williams had called McKnight apparently and asked him what should he do. We had a little friendship, says McKnight, built up through the church work together, he told the United Press International. He goes, I'm as shocked over this as anybody else. So Des Moines detectives Cletus Leeming and Arthur Nelson were sent to Davenport to pick him up. So McKnight, he warned Williams that he should say nothing on the 169-mile drive and wait until he arrived in town to make a statement in the presence of his attorney. Williams' lawyer...
Makes sense. Any lawyer would encourage that.
I suppose he would not ride with them because maybe he had his own car and it was just going to be too inconvenient. But to me, I think this lawyer was probably pretty smart and thought, there's no way these guys are just going to ride 170 miles back to Des Moines without talking to him. So he was kind of hoping for a way to make a case. The ride back to Des Moines would be the subject of legal wrangling for the next 16 years. But Nelson says there's no question he knew his rights. William was well-dressed and he was articulate. But the suspected killer, Williams, left Davenport for the 169-mile drive back to Des Moines with the detectives. And apparently Nelson drove the car and Cletus sat in the back seat with him and didn't ask him about the killing. But they said, we worked on his conscience, made him feel sorry, and that it would be the right thing at Christmas, of course, to tell his folks where the body was. Leeming started to chat, stroking William's ego by calling him Reverend and musing about religions. Court records would later show that the detectives mentioned the incoming bad weather to make him think how hard would it be for them to find the body, and then appealed to his religious side in suggesting that the family would want, quote unquote, a Christian burial. So a little
closure.
Yeah. What they did, they felt was right. And I agree. I would too. Because you don't really know at this time if she's dead or alive. You have no idea.
Very true.
A little further on, Williams told Nelson, take the road right off the interstate at the ramp to Mitchellville. Go off the T and take a right. Leaming's comments convinced Williams to lead him to a culvert 10 miles east of Des Moines. When they arrived at the location, they said we could see the body down in the snow. Sure enough, it was her. Pamela Kay's little body was half naked and frozen, and an autopsy would later reveal that she had been sexually assaulted and smothered. So this was
sad.
I know. Can't imagine the family.
And the little girl. I mean, it's Christmas, the most special time of the year.
That'd be something that you don't want to try, which I would constantly do as a parent, try to envision and imagine what was she going through. And that would be the thing you don't want in your head.
Never. No.
Hang on. Blooper. Here he goes. Perfect timing.
That would be my paying job.
Hopefully one day we'll get paid.
I love this more.
This is more fun. Okay, continue. It was shocking news across the state of Iowa, but especially for those in the YMCA building. Leonard's own 11-year-old sister was at the tournament and often played with little Pamela. It could have been her, he thought. Mark Powers said he newly realized that he wasn't infallible and that, quote, what you think you have control over, you don't, unquote. But I never blamed anything other than it happened, he says. You accept that it happened and you can't change it, but at the end of the day, you close your eyes and it still hurts. The YMCA, I know. I keep saying, I know. I know. Shut the fuck up, Annie. Okay, start over. No. The YMCA from this situation, from this horrific event, changed its policies, and they no longer were allowing residents to use the same front entrance as the YMCA members. But it also left a lasting memory for many people associated with the landmark, that Des Moines building, that otherwise teemed with joyous competition and hum with the music of aerobic classes. But the legal issues would keep the Christmas Eve nightmare alive for years. Subsequent questions about the legality of his comments to police were heard twice before the U.S. Supreme Court and are still studied today in law classes. It was only 2 years after the Miranda decision, I guess, which ruled that evidence gleaned from a suspect in custody was admissible only if defendants were made aware of their legal rights. Okay, yep, he was. The question, though, was whether Williams' Sixth Amendment right to a lawyer had been violated by the detective's conversation in the car as he led police to the body on the way back to Des Moines.
This is interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Williams went on trial April 30th, 1969, and was charged with first-degree murder. His attorney had tried to bar Leaming's testimony, insisting that the detective violated the prisoner's rights by questioning him in the car without his lawyer present. Yeah, this guy knew that was going to happen. But Leaming was permitted to tell his story. Yay. The verdict was guilty, and the sentence was life without parole. The Iowa courts didn't consider it a form of interrogation, which was upheld in the appellate court, said Tom McInnes, who was a professor at the University of Central Arkansas, who then later wrote a book called The Christian Burial Case, An Introduction to Criminal and Judicial Procedure. So apparently this book is pretty recent. So you could probably find it at any library or get it on Kindle or whatever. An Introduction to Criminal and... Oh, blooper. The U.S. Supreme Court decided Williams' rights had been violated.
Oh, wait. So he took it to the Supreme Court, appealed, and they said...
that he had been violated. Yeah, because the attorney knows what he's doing. They appealed it to the Supreme Court because it was upheld in the appellate court. So the first court is what? District, and then appellate, and then Supreme. And I'm not a lawyer, so if I have that wrong, sorry. Okay, in this instance... Okay, no, start over. The Supreme Court decided that Williams' rights had been violated.
Oh,
sorry. Sorry, I couldn't remember what we said. And I thought, oh, what you said was good. Okay, so,
okay, go for it.
Yeah, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that Williams' rights had been violated. So apparently...
So he did. So he appealed his case, And
to Supreme
and
Court.
it went all the way then to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And the U.S. Supreme Court said that his rights had been violated. However, Justice Potter Stewart left a door open for the second trial by saying that the body might be admissible evidence if it would have been lawfully found anyway. And I didn't know that was even a thing. So thankfully, there are people that do know the law. In this instance, more than 250 searchers were looking for Pamela and were getting close. So that's why they said her body would have been found anyway.
Absolutely.
So it was more than possible that they would have found her body without guidance from her killer. So that set up another round of court battles that ended back in the U.S. Supreme Court in 1984.
Oh my gosh. So this
still fighting.
Murder happened in 1968.
68. First went on trial in 69.
2 girls in 65. He murders this little girl, kidnaps her, murders her, sexually assaults her, murders her. And in 65, and the case in what year finally?
In 1968, he kills little Pamela Powers. In 1969, it goes to trial.
And then the trial finally ends, or the last.
And I think the last round of court battles, though it doesn't say that, we'll read on and we'll find out later. Maybe, but one of the rounds ended up in Supreme Court in 1984. Yeah. Williams' attorneys, so he has more than one, said,
I was good at math, I'd quickly throw in the number of years there.
Yeah, 79, 89. So it's like 15 years. Williams' attorneys said he was convicted on evidence that was, quote, fruit of the poisonous tree, unquote, the illegal interrogation. But a majority of justices found that there would have been an inevitable discovery. If the prosecution could establish by a preponderance of evidence that the information would have been attained by legal means, the evidence could be admitted. So the lasting impact of this case on the legal system is the approval of the inevitable discovery exception, McInnes said. It was a really good tool for prosecutors, so they could add this to the rule books, to the law books, and they teach their students going to law school about this. Justice John Paul Stevens scolded the detectives, however, for taking a shortcut and causing, quote, years and years of unnecessary but costly litigation. To Nelson, it was simple. If the man knew where the body was, it was the right thing to do. I agree. While incarcerated, Williams filed several of his own appeals, and his case went to the U.S. Supreme Court twice. Okay, that answers that.
Okay, so, but I agree with you that he did do the right things, simply because at the time when he was arrested or he turned himself into the police, we did not know
if she was dead or alive.
Alive or dead, and we wanted to find her alive.
And they never once asked him, did you kill her? What'd you do with her body? What did you do with her in general? They just said, wouldn't it be sad for the parents to not be able to bury their baby girl?
Interesting.
Because the ground would be frozen and they wouldn't be able to find her.
I think that's interesting. I'm wondering if any attorneys listening to the show, let us know. But I just listened or watched something else where they'd been read their Miranda rights and their lawyer wasn't present. And their lawyer said, I don't want you talking to him. However, they went ahead and, chatted with them anyway.
Oh, right.
And the person kept talking. And so as long as they're talking, it's legal. So maybe that changed sometime between then and now, or maybe
I know it's still happening.
I was watching isn't really an accurate.
Oh, I think Law and Order that's where I get all my law.
Yeah, this was
studies.
Not, so.
Just kidding.
Interesting though. So twice to the Supreme Court, and I guess the sad thing is if you hear that ching ching ching, that's all the money over the years that was spent.
That
case.
But also on the other side of it, I can see attorneys wanting to do the best job they can for their clients, but at some point, especially when it wasn't a situation where the detectives or the police are browbeating possibly an innocent man. This man already called the police and turned himself in. They weren't browbeating him and telling him what to say, like happened in that Stephen Avery case.
Correct, right.
And so at some point, I think it would be nice if we could try to think of the victims and put their rights ahead of the criminals. At least maybe not put them ahead of it, but
cool. And it feels like it's kind of swung that other way, that the victims' rights are not.
While incarcerated, Williams filed several of his own appeals, and his case went to the U.S. Supreme Court twice. After Leaming's request, Williams led him to the girl's body, but the detective's quote unquote Christian burial speech, as it came to be known, prompted constitutional arguments for years before the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the conviction. The justices said that Williams' statements cannot be used in his retrial, although Powers' body and related evidence could be used by prosecutors. Williams was subsequently convicted a second time. Williams' defense had tried to shift the blame from him to saying that someone else did it. Albert Bowers. He was a janitor at the YMCA, but by the time they went to trial, Albert Bowers had died. So Williams testified, though, that he found little Pamela Powers' body in his room at the YMCA, and he said he took the body from the building and buried it, which he didn't, because he was afraid he might be sent back to the Missouri Mental Hospital, and because he had been involved in a racial incident at a Des Moines high school.
So another incident that we really a racial, interesting.
Well, and if that even happened, that's what he says.
Oh, that's
true. I never thought about that.
Then on top of it, I just can't imagine that all of a sudden a body would show up in your room.
And instead of going to tell the people about it,
you know, they found it. It was unburied. So
yeah, it was in a culvert, which is in a ditch.
So, trying to cover his ass.
Yep, exactly. And you look guilty because you are guilty. Ooh, that could be a t-shirt slogan.
Right? What a zero.
In 1983, a federal appeals court ruled in his favor, but then the U.S. Supreme Court overturned that decision in 1984. However, I know it. Well, at least the Supreme Court overturned it. So, because the federal the federal appeals court ruled in his favor. Okay.
What?
Good job, Annie. Follow along. It's your story. However, Williams made additional efforts to gain his release in later years, trying to raise new issues in his long, complicated court case. Yes, it's long and complicated, and I'm not going to get into everything that the legal system went through, but he failed to regain his freedom. So in a nutshell, Williams was tried before two juries, one in Polk County in 1969, and I think another one in 1977 in Cedar Rapids. But he was found guilty of first-degree murder both times. So he spent 15 years in wrangling in the courts, and then he was just finally locked up for good. He wasn't going to get out.
Thank gosh.
Yeah. There was, remember that little boy, Robert Leonard, that he was a wrestler?
Yes.
That he developed, or he ended up becoming a radio show host. And in blooper. Okay, so remember that other wrestler that was 14? His name was Robert Leonard. He became a talk show. God damn it. Hang on. Where the fuck? What did he do? Okay, radio show.
Do you want this big one?
No, it's just because I made some changes from that one to this one. And so radio show host of Marion County is a familiar name. Robert Leonard, that 14-year-old boy that was sitting in the stands, you know?
Absolutely.
He says that it's illogical, but he'd be happy if the downtown Des Moines YMCA building is torn down after the organization closes its doors Friday, which would have been in 2014. But the building then later was torn down in 2015. So he says the building has haunted me for a long time. He was a wrestler in the tournament in the YMCA, and so on that day, and so he remembers Christmas Eve every year as when little Pamela Powers was kidnapped and murdered. So it's kind of tainted Christmas for him and the rest of Iowa.
Absolutely. It's supposed to be a happy time, and Des Moines should be a safe place.
Yeah, and that's what he says. He says, I was 14, and it was a loss of innocence. And he says it made Des Moines a scarier place. It sort of ruined Christmas for all of Iowa. Where is this poor little missing girl? What's happening to her? Unquote.
And the building wasn't to blame.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, I get the symbolism of how sad that was.
Ironically, my notes say the building was not to blame for all that was to happen. See, telling you, this chick is a mind reader. She has some telepathy going on. But apparently, Mark Powers, the brother he worked downtown Des Moines, or whenever he went to downtown Des Moines, he turned his head the other way. He didn't want to even see the building. And Mark thought, one day he would visit it again. For Leonard, it meant that he would always avoid the building, though, except when he had to drive past it and would mention the dark day to his wife. He says, quote, "Last night I dug out my medal. I won that tournament, but there was always a shadow of death hanging over the building. It's like she's forgotten, and I felt like there should be a memorial to her and all lost children."
Aww.
Mark Powers never went back to the building either. At some point, he said he considered paying it a visit, but he didn't. And his dad has passed away. His elderly mother lives in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and his older sister is actually in the Des Moines area. They have long survived this, he says, by leaning on each other and their church. He can't even summon hatred, though, he says, for Williams, who is 70 at that time in 2015 and serving a life sentence at the Iowa State Penitentiary in Fort Madison. Mark Powers says to the interviewer, I guess, he says, with all due respect, here you are 46 years later asking me about it. It never ends. It never rests. But I'm not afraid to talk about it. It took me 20 years to get to that point. I don't want people to forget my sister. So rest in peace, little Pamela, because this is why we're doing it.
Absolutely.
Dave Busick was a reporter for KCCI Channel 8 in Des Moines. A lot of people that live in Iowa, that grew up in Iowa, that listen to the news, remember hearing that name. On September 2nd, 1981, there apparently was kind of scuffle at the Fort Madison Penitentiary, and inmates took control of the state pen. And I think even a couple guards were murdered.
Wow.
They had homemade rifles.
This was in 81?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep. And so apparently the inmates were requesting or demanding, they were making demands that reporters would come and listen to them and get the word out, because I think they thought they were being mistreated, and I don't know what else they were complaining about. I could have looked into that, but I didn't, because wah. Sorry. One of the prisoners came to the fence at Fort Madison. Hang on, I'm going to start over. Mm-hmm. On September 2nd, 1981, inmates took control of the state pen at Fort Madison using homemade weapons. So Dave Busick, if you grew up in Iowa, he was a reporter for KCCI Channel 8 in Des Moines. And he says that the inmates made homemade weapons, homemade rifles, and they had taken several guards hostage at gunpoint. And he found out about it. So as a news photographer, God dang it. What the fuck? So he found out about it.
Okay, let's start that whole section
Let's start over.
So FYI, earlier when I said, but the building wasn't to blame for that. Uh-huh. And you're going, she just said that. I'm like, I know. I purposely was doing that.
Oh, I didn't know you said
to pop that in there. So then you could say agreed. I mean, it's kind of a shadow. And it was my way of like cutting.
Leading me and helping interact. Yes. Sorry. So okay, let's go back to that.
No, don't you don't have to go all the way back there.
Well, it's not that part. I mean, it's not that far.
I think that we need to go to the Dave Busick, though. So, okay. With all due respect, 46 years old, I'm not afraid to talk about it, blah, blah, blah. So now, okay, so fun, interesting. I think you need to say, here's an interesting fact, because
okay, right.
I gotta tell
There's no segue.
The first time I learned it, I was like, where the fuck is she going?
Right.
And so you've got to say,
true.
Listen to this little interesting story tidbit I found out in researching this. Something like that.
Okay, thanks.
To lead them in.
Yeah, yep. I need that.
Right. I hope you don't ever mind that I do.
Oh,
that.
Hell no. No.
Okay. I hope you do that with me too. If you see a place where like, Gail, that.
I will try to see it.
Yeah. I think you will when you're listening. It's easier.
So this is a fun little tidbit when I was researching. If you're from Iowa and you grew up watching Channel 8 News, which I did.
I did too.
Dave Busick, he was a reporter for them.
Remember him?
I remember him. On September 2nd in 1981, he says that the inmates took control of the state pen at Fort Madison. So apparently the inmates had made homemade weapons, including guns and rifles, and they had knives, etc. And they took several guards hostage at gunpoint. So Dave Busick found out about it. And so him and another photographer, they chartered a small airplane and flew down to Fort Madison. One of the prisoners apparently came to the fence to tell the reporter his concerns, which is, why they were even there in the first place. And Dave asks him what his name was. And the man replies, Tony Williams. So Dave jots the name down in his notepad. And then he says the wheels started spinning. Then he says in his article, quote, "Holy smokes, this is Robert Anthony Williams."
This is the guy who kidnapped
And
assaulted and murdered a little girl.
yeah, didn't just assault, he raped her.
Yeah.
I learned that from Lisa McVeigh, our first hero. She said to Tamron Hall, "We need to say what it was."
I agree.
Yeah, that's why I threw that in there, just because I thought of her.
Yep. You're right, though. At the end of the day, call it what it is.
Yeah,
it was a rape.
It was
Rape
horrific.
and murder. So anyway, this horrific man is standing right
in
next to
front of
Dave
him.
Busick.
Right. The only thing in between them is
the fence.
chain link fence or whatever they used. He says, so here in 1981, I was just about 2 feet away from Robert Anthony Williams, aka Tony, and I might get shot or taken hostage by these inmates. But still, all I remember thinking about is if I could just manage to reach my hands through the bars and strangle this guy.
Right?
No court in the land would convict me. Yeah, I would want to too. Yeah, because he has a lot of rights, But of course, I snapped back to reality. He's a murderer, not me, unquote.
Wow, what a coincidence that he just happens to be there.
Yeah.
And he's right next to this horrific man.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah. So everybody, I suppose, has their times that they can recall meeting a criminal and how it kind of impacted them, especially if it's from your hometown. Absolutely. And it was about a child.
Your husband mentioned it to you that we should do a story on it because it impacted him such.
Exactly. So in case you are wondering, okay, is this man still alive? What's he doing? He spent 48 years behind bars and he died in prison in 2017, December 21st, ironically 4 days before Christmas. Yep.
Well,
so
48 years behind bars is just not enough time for taking a life. And I would say, I hope his soul rests. God rest his soul. I'm not sure if it will.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I try not to wish.
It's very interesting that all happened. So Annie, one of the things, just as a side note, I noticed is that they had torn down the building and they did rebuild it. So here we are in the current day. The YMCA in Des Moines is a thriving community and organization.
It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful location.
Downtown Des Moines is so different than what it was when I was growing up. It is. It's just beautiful. And I think we're one of the top, 10, 100. I have to look that up, but I know that Des Moines is one of the leading cities. Yeah, for growth, and arts and culture.
Plug Des Moines, but hey, well, let's be honest, you wouldn't want to come here today. It's pretty cold.
Exactly.
I know. Well, Annie, I so thank you for again bringing us our next podcast, and really, it was so interesting. We had quite the zero with Williams. And we know he's the zero. And, it's hard to find a hero in this story, but I think there's a couple of heroes.
The detectives, right?
Absolutely.
Don't you think?
He said we did the right thing because we wanted to find her or her body. We didn't know if she was alive or dead, right? So I feel the detectives definitely did. And I think there were a lot of heroes from Marguerite, the lady at the receptionist desk, and so many others that were
the little boy that held the door open
and trying to search for her. So always find those heroes, and I know there's heroes all around in this story.
We need to look for the good, don't we?
Absolutely.
Even though I love creepy podcasts about creepy serial killers, I have to admit,
find a little good, Annie.
I do. I do look for the good, but can't help it.
I always giggle.
I'm fascinated.
My other job is motivational speaking. So
true that.
In that note, I want to say thank you. We want to say thank you so much for joining us and listening in on our second podcast. As you know, we're getting better every time.
Hopefully, yes.
We may take a step or two back and then come back forward. You just never know. But thanks for making sure that you tuned in and listened with us today.
And if you want to send us some emails regarding like your own hometown hero, your hometown zero, or a spooky ghost story, you can email us at
heroes20and more@gmail.com.
Or you can post. Wait, are you going to do that? Then you say, or Instagram us at. Yep. Is that how you want to do it?
Way.
Okay.
Okay, let's start that part over. So, joining us today. So, be sure to
Well, I think that part was okay. What we did, or Instagram us.
I know, but we got to start over on that because I'm screwed up now.
Okay. Yeah, I need to find.
What was it? What did we just
Instagram
say?
is. No, what did we just say?
Last thing we said. Play the last thing we said. Or we stopped at the downtown. I talked about we really enjoyed da 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 da.
I said so. If you said thanks for listening,
and then you said
if you would
have any stories, so start there and email us at, and then I'll say the email, and then I will say check us out on Facebook or Instagram at. Okay. And then you're going to say check out our website.
Okay.
Okay. And then I'll go if you want to donate money. Okay. So, and I'll point out it. So here we go. So you're going to say.
Okay. So if anybody has any hometown heroes or hometown zeros that you'd like to share with us or your spooky stories, you can email us at
heroes20 and more @gmail.com. And as Annie said at the beginning, remember heroes, in case you're spelling challenged, is ES and zeros is just OS. But don't forget the 2 is the actual number 2, but the word and is spelled out. So let's go through that again. Heroes20 and more @gmail.com. And of course, you can also check us out and follow us on both Facebook and Instagram. Annie.
Heroes Zeros Podcast.
Awesome. Heroes Zeros Podcast on Instagram and Heroes and Zeros, a true podcast on Facebook.
Yes.
Absolutely. I love it. And how about our website, Annie? They can also go ahead and check out our website.
And it is heroesandzerostruecrime.com. And that's www.heroesandzerostruecrime.com.
All right. And finally, again, we can't thank you enough for listening, and hope you want to support our efforts going forward. And so if you'd like to donate to us, we'd love to have that. And you can donate at.
Don't have that yet.
Okay. Annie can add that in later along with her awesome Anchor commercials. And anyone else that decides, no, I know we're cutting all this. Blah.
Was that a cow? Baby calf?
It was a combination
baby goat?
of a sheep, cow. Blah.
Thanks, guys, for listening.
Wait a minute. I gotta do that too. Okay. And if you want to donate to us, see you've said that.
Okay. No.
So now, thanks, guys, for listening.
Oh, thanks, guys, for listening.
Absolutely. We so appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again so much for joining us, everyone. Be sure to stay connected with us on social media at both Instagram and Facebook. Our Instagram is
Heroes Zeros Podcast,
and Facebook
Heroes and Zeros, a true crime podcast. And you can listen to our podcast episodes or support or donate money to us. And you can send us your stories and just a lot more at our website, which is
heroesandzerostruecrime.com. Again, that's heroesandzerostruecrime.com. And you can email us also at heroes20 and more. That's the number 2, heroes20 and more @gmail.com.
Exactly. And you can also support us at our Patreon site now, which is
patreon.com/heroeszeros.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.